What's going on, everyone? It's Alex here from Alex Physio. So today we're going to be going over the 5 do's and don'ts after a rib fracture. Welcome. For those of you who are new to my channel, my name is Alexander Kravich. I'm a physiotherapist in Vancouver, British Columbia. Today I'm going to be chatting about 5 do's and don'ts after a rib fracture. So let's get right into it. Do number 1 is do go for short walks. Although it may be counterintuitive to exercise because you're in so much pain, it is very important that you do stay mobile and stay active in whatever capacity you can. That could be short walks from the bed to the kitchen or around the house, and then slowly building up based on how you're feeling. Number 2, do work on your breathing exercises. Again, another thing that may seem counterintuitive in terms of breathing hurts. Breathing means movement of your ribs. However, inevitably you're going to have to breathe, of course, and in order to be able to decrease some of the risks of complications from having a rib fracture, such as a pneumonia, it's important that you try to work on your breathing exercises to try to maximize your lung health. Number 3, do be patient. I mean, everybody wants to get better as soon as possible, which is understandably so. However, we have to understand physiology and how physiology works, and most injuries don't get better within a few days, especially with a fracture. The body has to go through the stages of healing, and this can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months. So it's important that you are patient and you try to be encouraged by the small victories that you make each day, and not to be too distraught at how much more you need to do in order to get back to where you were before. So although very challenging, try to be patient. It should get better, especially if you don't have any significant past medical history that can sometimes slow healing from that 6-week to 3-month window. And obviously depending on how bad your fracture is and if you have multiple rib fractures or any other sort of complications. But do be patient, it should get better. Number 4, do change positions. So again, something that may seem counterintuitive. You want to stay in the same position, you want to find the position of comfort and not spend lots of time moving. However, it is important that you change positions, going from lying down to sitting, to lying on your side, to standing, to walking. All these positions are really good for you. It's good for your mobility and good for your overall lung health to again decrease some of the risks and complications associated with a rib fracture. Number 5, do use your pain as a guide for your activity. I always try to tell people push to the pain, but not through it. Not necessarily no pain, no gain, but it's important to use pain as a guide, but not do anything just because you're having some pain. And again, everybody's pain scale is on the 0 to 10 is going to be different. So just do what you can and slowly try to build up off of it based on how you're feeling from the previous day. 5. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the 5 don'ts. So don't number 1 is don't tape your rib fracture. Although this may seem intuitive to do, you want to tape the area to try to mobilize it to help with pain control. And although there is a little bit of research to support doing that for some pain control, we're missing the main emphasis of this is that you can't tape or immobilize your ribs like you can immobilize your wrist or your ankle if you've had an injury, like putting it in a cast or using a tape job. You have to use your ribs. So by taping that area, you're increasing the risk of lung complications such as a pneumonia or mucus buildup, because that tape is going to force your ribs to not be able to expand as much, and subsequently it's going to force your lungs not being able to expand as much. And if you're not using your lungs to the fullest capacity, then you can increase the risk of some of those lung complications. Number 2, don't lie down in bed all day, as what we chatted about from the do's with regards to changing position. Again, it may seem intuitive, just lie down in bed until it gets better and then you can start living your life. However, research shows that by doing some light activities and some breathing exercise early on, you can help to improve the likelihood that you have a successful recovery and decrease the risk of complications. So it's important, although it can be painful, especially in the early few days, to move. It's important that you're not lying in bed all day and that you are trying to at least change positions and get around the house and then build up off of that based on how you're feeling. Number 3, don't participate in contact sports or heavy lifting or heavy exercises. Again, this may seem intuitive, but you'd be surprised at how quickly individuals want to push to these upper limits and higher intensity exercises early on. Although it's commendable that you are feeling well enough in order to do so, you just want to make sure that you're slowly building back up to your level of tolerance, because if you try to jump into it too early, especially if you've been not doing too much the first few weeks, then sometimes that can flare up those symptoms. So you just want to be mindful of this, and of course speak to your healthcare provider or physiotherapist to help put you on a pathway to recovery so that you minimize the risk of flare-ups and maximize your outcomes. Number 4 is don't neglect other symptoms. So these are symptoms such as increasing work of breathing, shortness of breath, sharp chest pains with short inhalations. We're talking about changes in the skin color, any other form of bleeding, nausea, vomiting, bloody stools. All these things are signs to monitor if there are any other sorts of complications, especially if you haven't had any imaging done. Things like any internal organ injury, depending on what kind of fracture it was and how the fracture occurred, if it affected other organs around the rib cage and lung area. Things like pneumothorax or a hemothorax, where air builds up in the space, or a hemothorax where blood fills in the space between the lungs and the outer lining of the lungs. These are things to be mindful of, and paying attention to those kinds of signs is super important, especially in the early days as following a rib fracture in the absence of any imaging. And the 5th don't is don't overexert yourself. Again, early on, you probably are going to be less likely to do this. However, as you start to feel comfortable, it's easy to want to just kind of push the boundaries and want to do too much. However, this can be a way, as I mentioned before, to increase the risk of flare-ups, and progressing into something or doing too much too soon can set you back in the future. So it's just important to slowly try to build up your tolerance and your activity levels, and working with a physio or your healthcare provider just to make sure you're on the right track to optimize your recovery. There you have it. We went over 5 do's and don'ts after a rib fracture. Let me know your thoughts below. Have you had a rib fracture, or are you currently recovering from one? What are some things that have helped with your symptoms, and what are some things that haven't? Let me know down in the comments below. I have a bunch of other videos on rib fractures and some of the aspects associated to healing, and more information and exercises as well that you can feel free to check out on my channel. And if you find value in my videos, please consider subscribing to my channel. It really allows my channel to grow and allows me to reach a wider audience. Until then, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.